One of the eminent scholars in Islamic finance. We have Professor Rodney with us. Professor Rodney founded the Islamic finance program at Durham University in the United Kingdom, where he continues to serve as an emeritus professor. He was a visiting professor at the Qatar Faculty of Islamic Studies in 2009, 2010, and 2012, and since 2013 has been an emeritus professor at the International Center of Education in Islamic Finance, or INCF, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Over 12 books and over obviously 40 articles, and Professor Wilson has recently been awarded the most prestigious IsDB prize in Islamic banking and finance for the year 1435 Hijriah, or 2014, in recognition of his substantial contributions to the development of Islamic banking and finance. So I'm honored to ask Professor Wilson a number of questions. First question that we would like to ask you, Professor Wilson, is that what do you think is the driving force behind the passion you have shown for the field of Islamic finance?
I think the interesting thing in Islamic finance is it's basically a moral and ethical approach to finance. It's about doing things in a way which involves justice in financial transactions. And it's not so much qualitative difference, a quantitative difference is made, but a qualitative difference. It's basically an alternative way of doing finance. It's very clear to me that there's a lot of shortcomings in the conventional financial system. Islamic finance doesn't have all the answers, but it is addressing the questions. And it can actually, I think, succeed quite well in the longer term, and it is already succeeding.
Thank you. And after 4 decades of modern Islamic finance, what would you say are the lessons we have learned?
Well, I think we've learned basically what Islamic banks can and cannot easily do. Essentially, they're responding to their clients' demands. They're providing a wide range of financial services. A lot of it is retail. A lot of it is activities like finance of vehicles, finance of mortgages. And of course, all of that helps stimulate the service sector in the economies in which the Islamic banks are operating. So although it hasn't transformed the economies of the GCC in Malaysia, nevertheless it's played an important contribution to basically financing consumer purchases and also financing some small and medium-sized enterprises, but a large part of it has been retail to individuals. And I think that's a useful thing, and it's enabled them to have more purchasing power and to bring forward purchasing decisions, which again stimulates the local economy.
Right. And in your lecture today, you said Islamic financial institutions provide an alternative model for intermediation based on religious laws that stress transactional justice and a market system that is fair for all participants. If this is the case, why are countries so slow in adopting Islamic finance? Any thoughts on how to encourage those reluctant countries to give Islamic finance a try?
Yeah, I think it happens at different levels basically. One thing is you need ideally you want a law which basically regulates the Islamic banking system. Many countries don't have such laws, and politically there's some opposition. But I think more important actually, if you can get the message across to ordinary people, then they're more likely to become clients of Islamic banks. Somehow at the moment that message isn't really getting across very well. And I think it partly reflects the fact that the institutions which are in some of the large Muslim countries are basically small institutions, and they don't really have much reach. Now, one solution would be for the large Islamic banks, which exist in the GCC and maybe Malaysia, to expand into other markets, because they've really got a lot more experience. So that may be one way of going about it, basically. So it's not just government; it's also, the potential clients themselves. You've got to convince the clients that there's something genuinely different about Islamic finance. You've got to convince them about the merits of it, basically, and explain it in a way which they understand. So there's a sort of education effort needed, essentially. And at the moment, that's not really happening.
I see. Right. On another note, how do you assess the IRT contribution to the evolution of Islamic economics, banking and finance?
I think IRT's performed a very useful function at different levels. Obviously it runs its own training and teaching programs. It also has acted as a research centre. It's also disseminated research by other people, by outsiders. It's also basically been involved in directly, in some cases, in sponsoring conferences and seminars at which Islamic banks have been launched in different countries. I've attended a number of these things myself over the years, and this has been very successful. So IRT, on the one hand, is providing development, Islamic development banks providing development finance. But on the other hand, it's basically contributing to research and basically publications, and dissemination of research findings in Islamic finance. So I think that's a very valuable role.
Right, right. It's good to know that. And perhaps the last question would be, in connection with the real economy, what challenges do you foresee for the Islamic finance?
Well, quite a lot. At the moment, as I said, a lot of it's largely retail and so on, and that's fine. But there's other things that they could be involved in. There's a big potential in many Muslim countries, particularly some of the larger countries, in terms of agricultural development. Now, by agricultural development doesn't just mean opening up areas to growing crops and so on, but actually improving what's grown. You know, one could have more organic farming, try to increase the quality of food output, ensure more healthy food produced and so on. A lot of things can be done. They need finance. And you know, people need to be well informed about basically these sorts of issues. Maybe as well, you know, labelling such food halal and so on. This would all help. So there's a potentially large halal economy, if you like, which Islamic banks can obviously be well placed to serve. And I think this is something that could be developed further in economies like Indonesia, in South Asia, for example, in some of the larger African countries, which have agricultural sectors which are frankly not well developed. And they could produce much better quality produce, and this is the way forward for them, and they can get premium prices for these quality produce. But you need to educate the consumers as well about the advantages of that. So I think quite a lot of potential actually in agriculture. It's something I've been looking at myself recently, and I think it could be quite exciting actually, and would create employment and bring more income in these countries.
Right, right. Thank you for your very thoughtful insights on some issues of Islamic finance, and it's good to have an interview with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.